Selectmen's meeting for June 3. We actually have an audience tonight for a change. How nice. We have to announce that the meeting is being recorded, and we want to start by taking a moment of appreciation for the servicemen and women serving in Afghanistan. Thank you. And I guess we'll start with a continuation from April 15 liquor license application, Pedro Laredo, DBA Antara.
He is not here.
Okay, we'll go on to our next item.
I think that there was a hearing on that, so you can either postpone, adjourn the hearing with, deny it with no prejudice, or you can continue the hearing to a date certain to give him another opportunity if he wants to come back.
Do we know what's going on?
Evelyn contacted him last week and told him that he should request a postponement in writing from the selectmen, and he said
He didn't do that?
Yeah, he didn't come forward with that. He's talking with Building Inspector John Naff, about a situation
Yeah.
with the restroom, but that has not been resolved.
What's the way that we can do it that gives him the greatest flexibility then to come back? Why don't we do that?
Could we
you
continue?
can-
Leave
it open?
You can adjourn it, you can deny it with no prejudice.
Oh, and then he could
And then he can reapply.
reapply?
Can you also just leave it open?
Or you
You
can
leave it
continue
open.
to
You
another.
have to leave it open to adjourn it to a date certain, and
Oh.
we don't know when he's gonna be ready.
Oh, that's true, because we'd have to postpone to a certain date, right? And we don't know when that would be.
What's the easiest thing for him, Evelyn, for us to do?
It's been over almost 2 months, and he hasn't really made much of an effort to get his establishment
Oh,
going.
If you leave it open, he still doesn't have a license. No matter what, he would have to come back here.
yeah.
Operate, but
So if we leave it open till the 1st of September, that gives him the summer. He's working with John Naff now, is that correct?
Do you have a calendar, though? Is that?
Oh,
Because-
well, whatever that meeting is, the first meeting in September.
We've
Yep.
got Mike's calendar,
We got it right here.
September 2.
yeah.
September 2nd.
So I'll, unless there's difference, I'll move that we hold it open until
Continue the
September-
hearing.
Excuse me, continue the hearing until September 2nd.
Yeah,
there-
I'll second that.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
At 7
7 p.m.
p.m.
Okay, good.
Exactly. And that leads us right into a presentation to Police Chief Meany and Fire Chief Kingsbury by Pat Keanley.
Keneally.
Sorry,
Yes.
Keneally.
That is right.
Mr. Chairman, maybe just some background information. Patrick Keneally is actually from Plymouth, but he's well-known here in Medfield. He's been on Medfield TV numerous times. He served as a merchant mariner in the Irish, the British, and the American merchant marines. When Roger Hardy died and the merchant marine flagpole was dedicated to him, Patrick read several poems and talked about his good friend Roger Hardy. The two of them, along with Jack, have worked a lot through Medfield TV to bring about public awareness of not equal treatment that the merchant mariners have received over the years compared to the other branches of service. So he's been on Medfield TV numerous times, and in light of the tragedy that happened with the two Boston firefighters dying in the Back Bay, Patrick has written a poem. He presented it to the public safety people down in Plymouth, and because of his tie, we'll say Medfield's his second home, he wanted to do the same to the police and fire departments here in Medfield, and he has a presentation he wants to make to our chiefs.
What I'm about to say, and I don't have a brogue, as Roger Hardy used to say, I got an Irish accent. In the English, and I emphasize English dictionary, a brogue is an organic impediment in the tongue, dialectic. And damned if I got an organic impediment in my tongue. And thank you for inviting me here. books of poems I've written. Mostly they're events in my life. There's nothing I pull out of the air. It's things that happened to me as a kid and in the north of Ireland, both with the British and various people that worked longshoring in Dublin called the Animal Gang. Anyhow, I survived all of this and I came to the United States. And my family said I should write more and more poems and publish them. Who really put me on the road was a professor from Harvard University. I had worked on his home, painting and remodeling. I was giving him some receipts, and something fell out of my wallet. He picked it up, and it was a poem that I had written. He said, "What do you do with these?" I said, "I put them in a drawer and I write another one." He said, "No, no, no. This should be shared. And this is what I'm going to share with you tonight. I'm no stranger to fire. I lived in a home that was built by the British. It was a billet house or watch house for the British Army. The infamous Black and Tans were billeted there. After the rising against the British, that home was given to my father's cousin who became mayor of the city. It was called the Yankee House because it was built of wood. And one day at 4 years old, I was looking for a ball under the bed with a lighted paper, and the house went up. With it went the cargo of timber from a Swedish ship in the harbor. And it was devastating. So I'm no stranger to fire. My heart goes out to the families and to the firemen of these United States. So stand by. I gotta find my cheaters.
Now you look like the Harvard professor.
After getting the news, I thought about these brave men. I went to the Plymouth firefighters headquarters with my camera, and they broke up laughing. They said, "You still can't get filmed for that kind of a camera?" I got the picture here. The camera did well. So here we go. Dear Heavenly Father, we firefighters beseech Thee, O Lord, for You to keep all of us firefighters safe and forever under Thy most gracious protection and loving care. Please hear our prayer. Please protect us, dear Lord, from destiny's raging inferno, that one sad day could come our way, a raging fire, not of our desire, that would meet us head on any given night or day, at times coming at us from the left, and times coming from our right, a towering, raging inferno that we firemen were trained to fight, a very hot fire in howling winter winds that would resist our heartbreaking efforts to save our firefighting comrades and friends, and our fellow men, hoping and praying that they should see once more, God willing, the dawning of another day, with bowed weary heads and bended knees, dear Lord, and heavy heart and hand, we firefighters turn as one to You, our Savior, to accept this baptism of fire, come what may, and with God's help, live to fight another night, or perhaps to fight another day. To present this to you and all firefighters in the town of Medfield. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Greatly appreciate it. Thanks for thinking of us. Taking it with great pride.
Very nice.
I gave it a little nautical touch on the aft side of it. So I hope it hangs well.
Thank you very much. Greatly
More than
appreciate it.
welcome. Thank you. I talked with Jack Peterson about a presentation, and Jack said to me, you know, Patrick, I don't think we can do it. What about our policemen? Well, not too long ago, coming home, I ran into a blockade by the Plymouth Police, and 2 blockades. The first one let me go because I said I had to go to the bathroom. The second one wouldn't let me go. They said, go into that house there. I said, I can't do that. And there was helicopters topside, there was people with tripods and cameras, chaos, you name it. And I have to go to the bathroom. The car ahead of me got impatient and he pulled out with a Huey, and I moved up behind the next car. The police officer came over, he said, you'll be another hour and a half here. I said, I gotta go to the bathroom. He said, no can do. I said, okay, I'll hang on to it. But I couldn't hang on to it, so I got out, and I got a 5-gallon bucket over the back of my Honda, and I opened the passenger side, and lo and behold, Niagara all over again. And did I feel good? But an hour and a half later, we were cleared. And I thought that police officer, I thought a good friend of mine, Mac, John McGinnis in Newton, we used to fish together. And he told me the most dangerous calls they got was domestic violence, and especially on night patrol. Now, I have to get a poem in a hurry, and Jack said, you can do it. And I thought about it, and then I thought about my friend Mac. Mac and I went to Holyhood Cemetery to dress up the family grave one spring. And Mac looked at me with a distant look, and he said, Patrick, if you don't come down here and visit me next spring, I'll come back and haunt you. I seen Mac take the heart attack that spring hanging onto a mailbox in Newton Highland Square. I took home his uniform from Newton Wellesley Hospital. My heart was broken. Now I got to write a poem for a police officer. And I said, hey, Mac, I need help. And I thought of, I'm telling me of the night patrols, the lonely tension, felt wondering if I'm going to make it home tonight. He said, you don't know the violence. You think Newton is a quiet place? There's a lot of violence. I said, Mac, I need help. And you know, within a half an hour, thinking of Mac on the night patrol and the stories he told me, it was easy to put the poem together. Stand by, please. This is what I wrote. Dear Heavenly Father, please protect us, police officers, as we patrol some of our city's deadly streets in the light of day or in the dark of night. Please hear our prayer, hoping and praying for us never to encounter that dangerous and heartless gun-toting felon, a felon that does not care, likened to the drug-crazed addict found almost anywhere, that would shoot to kill a fellow citizen, a patrolling police officer. Both felon or crazed addict shows no remorse or even sheds a silent tear. We beseech thee, O Lord and Savior, in the dead of night, please hear our silent prayer, that we police officers should live to see the dawning of a bright new day, for us to safely go home to our waiting and beloved families, thanking our Lord and Savior for washing most of our fears away.
Very nice.
I present this to you and the town of Medfield, and thank you for your services.
And I thank you very much. Fine job. And I'd like you to know, at any time, the facilities at 110 North. We will not turn you away.
I'm not finished with you. This particular poem is in memory of Lieutenant Edward J. Walsh, Jr. of Boston Fire Department, and his partner, Michael Kennedy. Firefighting jigs are we, from sea to shining sea, fighting fires for you, fighting fires for me, taking time out, dear Lord, to pray that we firefighters, God willing, would survive to fight another night, or perhaps to fight another day for you.
All right.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I want to thank the selectmen and the town of Medfield. Michael O'Sullivan, that's his Irish name. And I was explaining to him, soul is I in the Irish language. A one means number one. Sullivan is Sullivan also. Most of all, I want to thank my wife, Evelyn, for all her understanding and care, helping me with spellings the American way, not the English or Irish way. And last but not least, Jack Peterson, my good friend of Medfield TV. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next item of business is a public hearing, a request to solicit Luke Demma, canvassing manager for Anderson window replacement.
Gonna have a tough act to follow, be that.
Compared to that, lifetime of experience right there. My name's Luke Demma. Nice to meet all of you. From Worcester, I work for Renewal by Anderson, as you said. We canvass in a lot of towns in Massachusetts, so we like to do everything by the book. Anderson Windows, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of them. We have a reputation to uphold, so we want to do things the right way. There are about 8, 9 guys, not including myself, that would be requesting to solicit in the town. When we hire anyone, we run background checks and drug screenings because we don't want to hire unfavorable characters as well to be going around door to door in towns. So this is why I'm here. And if there are any questions regarding the process or any concerns, I'm not sure if you run background checks on each one of them or how the process works, but we get permitted in every town. So basically, we go out, we knock on doors. We don't do any money exchange or any cash. What we do is we'll knock on the door, look for the homeowner to be there. If they're there, we ask them how old the windows are, if they'd be interested in having someone come out to give them a free estimate. Otherwise, we don't do any sales right there at the time. So basically, we knock on the door if they have any interest to have us come out, give them a quote on the windows. Quote's good for a full year. That's why we do come out. So we don't do any money exchange at the door or anything like that. And we only go to about 7:30 at night. So basically, we'll be out before it's dark. And we do work the weekends sometimes as well, but we're out way before dark on the weekends. We work like a 9 to 4 on Saturdays or Sundays. So if there are any questions you have for me, I think
What period of time are you looking to be doing this?
as soon as possible.
As soon as possible until when?
As long as the permit would be allowed to be good for. Usually, we only go to a town once a year. So if it were
How long
to,
do you stay, is what I'm asking, I guess.
we'd only be around for a couple of weeks. It would only take us, before we were to hit any spots that were to be residential areas that we go to. We don't go to rental properties, obviously, so, once we've gone to the areas where we've done work in the town, we kind of go to the surrounding residential areas to speak with homeowners. So it'd probably only take us a couple weeks, and then say 10 months later, we would come back. Because a lot changes, certain people aren't home when you go through the first time, and then houses are for sale, they're sold, so we usually, we don't come by every few months, because that's a little ruthless. We don't want to tick off the homeowners too much, so we try to be as respectful as possible while we're out there.
I don't remember you guys coming to Medfield before. Have you been in Medfield before?
Me personally, I have not
Okay.
been to Medfield before. I've been in Anderson for about a year and a half. I was just a canvasser, and now I run a team of the canvassers now, so this is the first time that I have come through Medfield. I worked at a company before, Anderson. They didn't run it quite as well, but I don't remember if we came to Medfield when I was there either.
Okay. We happen to have our chief of police here. Chief, do you have any issues?
Typically, what we do is you submit the application with names and some data of the individuals who will actually be doing the canvassing in Medfield. It goes to Evelyn, who then forwards the list to me. I take a look down the list. I don't return any information specifically about any individual. I just say, 6 yes, 1 no, something like that, and then they go along with it. And we've had, very few problems with any of the folks that come here to ask permission the correct way. It's the folks that just kind of decide they're going to start tomorrow morning at 9:30 that create the problem with us. Anderson has done soliciting in Medfield before in the past 2 or 3 years, and
Okay.
we don't have, we've had no issues with them. They're very good, especially, one of the key things is after dark, and they understand that very clearly. People don't like the doors being banged on at 8:30 at night.
Do we have a set time of a policy of when they can start and when they end?
As far as daylight?
Time-wise, the clock-wise?
Clockwise, the way I do it is dusk, because it's different in November than June.
Okay.
So I don't necessarily give them a time limit, tell them like on a night like tonight, you could probably be out there till 8:30 and be okay. 6 months ago, that would not be true. Sometimes we have those issues, and we just remind people and shut them down.
Any further questions?
No?
Do you do photo IDs, for identification?
They have their own IDs with them, with the company.
All of our guys, but I have, all kinds of, certain towns do it a different way, so they'll give us certain ones depending. So if they want to make up a permit for us, then we'll put it on our lanyards, so that if the homeowners ask, they know we're legitimate, they can see town of Medfield.
Yep.
But if they don't want to make up a permit, all of our guys do have these, as the company and their name and our address and our business, so it really depends on the preference.
It used to be a bit simpler when we actually created things like the license to carry firearms on our own, but now everything just gets sent away and a card gets returned to us, so we don't do a lot of that photographic work that we used to do. One of the things that they do for us, which is very helpful, is before they start soliciting a particular day, hi, we're going to be around Norwood, Cross, Elm, so if we get a phone call, there's somebody here that says they're from Anderson Windows, are they really? Yes, they are, and they give us the names who's going to be soliciting, so they've been very, very cooperative.
Good.
Mr. Chairman, do we have a time, do you want to submit a time period on this permit of when you're going to start, when you're going to end?
I'd like to start Monday, if that would be possible, and if you'd allow it to be good for a full year, that would be the best for me, but if you only want to make it good for a month or 2 month period and then have us reapply the next time we come, we could do either one. But if you'd only want us to just come through and do the process each time we're here separately, then by Monday, if you could, that would be the best.
And if we did it that way, Monday through when? You said 2 weeks?
Or a month, you were saying no? Probably
Just to
a
be
month.
safe, a month.
A month?
A month, yeah.
Yeah, a month would be enough time.
Okay.
I think it's better for us if we limit you to a month instead of a year.
We can
And
always
then-
reapply.
Yeah, if you want to come back and,
It's not a
and then
big
we
deal.
just are alerted,
Okay.
so that's helpful to the town, I think, to know.
Yeah.
All right, fair enough.
And the other thing, I'd just like to suggest that it read dusk or 8 PM. I just think once you get after 8 PM, it gets too late for people coming to your door.
Yep, I agree.
At, you know, a dusk in a while could be 9 o'clock, so I'd like to limit that to say dusk or 8 PM, whichever came first.
Fine.
That's no problem. We actually aim to get back at our office in Northborough by 8 o'clock, so we would have to leave here probably like 7:30 at the latest.
Okay, I'll backtrack that and say dusk or 7:30.
That works.
All right.
So we have a motion, is there a second?
I have a motion that we allow Anderson Windows to canvass for a, through the end of June, a one-month period through June 30th, and that it be limited time-wise to dusk or 7:30, whichever comes first.
I would just amend that just to make it a full month, because they're not gonna start until Monday,
Oh.
which is gonna be June, whatever it is.
So July 3rd?
Yeah, whatever, so make it a month.
11th, or not
Then you have the long first week in July.
Oh, that's true,
People aren't around.
yeah.
July 9th?
And then we're just thinking that we're gonna lose the week of July 4th, two
Okay.
people out, so maybe extend it one more week after that, so that it's, so you get a full
30th
full
is-
month, yeah,
Appreciate that.
What's the date then, Evelyn?
yeah.
I think that last Friday in June is good.
Is it, you think so?
rather than- Yeah,
Then going into July?
because you usually do 2 or 3 weeks for canvassing.
Okay.
Oh, well, then we should do 3 weeks and do it through the end of June.
So that,
So as, at June's 30, as we started with.
okay, through June 30th.
All right, I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
Okay, good.
Thank
So
you.
good, thanks, Luke.
Thank you, good luck.
Thank you.
And now we're ready for our appointment with the Economic Development Committee, discuss draft for long-term ground lease pertaining to Lot 3 Ice House Road.
Ralph Costello, Economic Development Committee. And most of a good many of the members are here, so they may have comments also. But this is a draft proposal for an RFP for Ice House Road, which is for a ground lease that this is a way of advertising for somebody to make proposals for use that would be in a lease form. And the on the proposal itself, or the request for proposal, there is first it's essentially a kind of lease, it's for a 99-year period. They're looking at trying to find somebody that would be offering some sort of use that would be consistent with current zoning or complementary to it, but at the same time not competing with the Kingsbury Club, which that's part of the initial proposal, initial paragraphs. The qualifications are basically 3 main qualifications. First, that somebody have development or other projects of similar type that they've already done. And second, the ability to finance it. And third, experience with operation of the facility that's being proposed. Now, do you all have copies of that?
We do.
Yeah.
Yep, those were circulated this past week.
On the second page, there's proposal submission requirements. So these are basically it outlines the requirements in the application. So the first would be something about corporate background, find out who we're dealing with. And second, identifying projects of similar development. 2, identification of the project team. With every project or developer, usually there's of a project of the size and scope that this would be, there would be some need to have probably a team of people, whether it be designers or architects or site planners. And so who those people would be, that would be a requirement for people to put in. A list of all the development projects that they've done in the last 5 years is helpful in trying to analyze what's going to happen with the proposal. A preliminary pro forma with projected income and expenses for at least 5 years to get a sense of whether or not it's going to be financially successful. Because, essentially, what's most important, at least as we've discussed it as a committee, is to have somebody that's going to execute the plan, and to actually build the project, and hopefully a successful project. So, part of the application process is to try to get at what, whether they're going to fulfill that requirement. Term of the lease, how long a period are they thinking? Is it 10 years, 20 years, or is it the entire 99 years? And also the estimated value of the improvements that would be put on the site, which is, and the financing commitments to see whether or not somebody is financially able to handle, a project of the size and scope that is being proposed. Evidence of corporate stability. How long have they been in business, and what do their financial statements look like? Identification of any firms or individuals who might be collaborating, in the project. Who are those people? To find out who the parties are that are involved. And also a site plan and facility plan. What is into, what does the project look like? Is it aesthetically pleasing? Is it going to fit into the neighborhood? So the site plan and the facility plan are very important. There's there's description of the business that's, which is important, because what business is going to be operated from the facility, and what are the chances of it being successful, and sort of evaluating whether or not, what kind of success it will have. And to have the applicant put in what their vision is for that business. An estimated total of a number of employees. Parking, what kind of traffic that might be drawn to the area. As far as the proposal, the selection criteria, it's a process between, as I understand it, between the Economic Development Committee and also the Board of Selectmen, which, we would look at proposals, invite people to make proposals, and then review the proposals, and then the good ones, maybe get the companies in and interview them to ask questions of what, in depth about what the project is all about. Those are essentially the main items in this RFP. And if you have any questions, I think we can, this is a draft, so it can be modified and changed. And it's not out there yet.
When we did the Kingsbury Club, what was that in a vote of the Economic Development Committee and the Board of Selectmen? How did that work?
I believe with the proposal, you went to town meeting and got the authority to lease, and then issued the proposal, and economic development worked.
This proposal, we developed it using a sort of a template of the Kingsbury Club.
Okay.
And we revised some of the things within it.
Sure.
And so we might want to, look at that. And of course, one of the provisions that was added is that it wouldn't really compete with, the
Right.
Kingsbury Club, and this one, because they have a lease there that they're operating under.
But my only question on that is the article at town meeting, does that not just say Board of Selectmen?
Well, it's ultimately of the board. The committee is appointed, the economic development is appointed by the selectmen, so they would make a recommendation to the selectmen. But I believe under state law, you'd have to be the party to vote to make the actual transaction.
So would it be
It's a
just the
lease
Board
or
of
sale.
Selectmen, or would it be a combined vote of the Economic and the Board of Selectmen?
It would be a vote of the Board of Selectmen based on the recommendation of the Economic
Okay.
Development Committee.
Yeah.
The one thing that you want to think about, because this was a little bit controversial as far as the financing of the project, the Kingsbury Club went, was in the lease document, we said that the lease would not be subservient to the mortgage, so that if there was for any reason, a financial problem and that went under, the bank could not preempt the town and take possession of the land and sell it for another use. We wanted to make sure that the town ultimately had control over the future use of the property.
Yeah, and that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a very important point,
Yeah.
to make sure that,
But it does make your financing a little bit more difficult to arrange. The banks think twice when they
Yeah.
are faced with that, so.
but that's the way it's gotta be.
Yeah, part of that would be, you know, if, once proposals are in, we take a look at them, and, you know, ultimately, the selectmen have the opportunity to negotiate whatever those lease terms are, and that certainly would be one of the key elements.
I should interrupt here, because of the fact that I live next to this property, I can't participate in this discussion, so let me recuse myself from any further part in this discussion. I'll just join the audience.
One other additional thing I think you might want to consider, are you contemplating putting anything in the RFP as to what would be an acceptable use, or are you going to just leave that up to the market?
I think we leave that up to the market. I mean, with the wording, you know, one of the issues, that was one of the issues that the committee discussed, and, you know, it was thought, I guess, the general consensus.
Oh, thank you.
General consensus was that we would leave it open to invite more people to, there might be some creative ideas out there that will, you know, somebody will come in with something that we hadn't thought of,
Yeah.
you know, and say, well, gosh, why didn't we think of that? You know, and it might be perfect. So, but, you know, a lot of the discussion has been around the sports facility, but that doesn't mean that that's, you know, that's going to happen. I mean, it means that, you know, we'll look at the proposals as they come in, and try to judge them, and look to the selectmen to give their comments, and but whatever is finally decided, the selectmen will be the body that decides who the lease goes to and on what terms. But we can recommend as a committee, but you guys decide.
Would you put in an RFP anything dealing with the size, or that would depend on what you get back, and then you would look at that? Is that a normal procedure to put any type?
I would say that, you know, I would leave that open to invite, you know, as many proposals as possible, as many creative ideas. And then even though somebody would propose something that might be of a particular size, they might be able to operate something, you know, that was less of a size, and that would be something that would be negotiated, that might come up in a committee, or might come up in the planning board, or some other body that would look at this and say, well, rather than do that, why not, you know, why not just reduce the size down and have something, you know, as far as the elevations of the buildings, and, you know, all of those things I think are, you know, important. But they, you know, this is, I think the RFP is to get something out there that people can say, yes, I will, you know, make a submittal, you know, and trying to get, you know, to do a particular project, or a business, or whatever it is. You know, and having those people understand that, you know, that there's going to be an obligation, you know, obligation on the part of, you know, the lease payments, and certainly the property tax, and, you know, the building tax, rather, you know. Property would not, in this RFP, property tax, you know, land tax would not be taken, because, you know, that's under the lease. But the proper personal property taxes and buildings and improvements would be taxed, can be taxed.
When you issue an RFP, do you have a time period that there's a deadline date on that? How do you determine?
There is a date that,
How do you determine that date?
There's a date certain that once it goes out, that at the end of this RFP, it says that they have to submit the proposals to the Board of Selectmen by X time, which we have not put in here yet.
How do you determine that? What's the normal process to determine an end date?
Well, Michael?
You have to, it has to be advertised to the Central Register, which usually takes a couple of weeks to get in, and then I think it has to be at least 14 days from the date it's published in the Central Register. The minimum time you can have the bid opening is 14 days. You can do it longer if you want to do a month. If you want to do 2 months, you could. But usually you try to have a fairly restricted time frame. Frequently what they will do is the committee would hold a pre-bid session for interested parties to either tour the site or to ask questions about what the town would
That
like.
makes sense, yeah.
Frequently in these RFPs too, they will put a criteria upon which the selection will be based. For example, they might say that revenue to the town might be valued at 25%, impact on the neighborhood might be valued at 25%. The aesthetics or the compatibility with, or value to the residents of the town might be 20%. So you add up to 100%, so that when someone's making a proposal, since it's not strictly on money, they have some idea of how the town is going to judge which proposal is best.
And one of the issues I should bring up is that there was discussion in our committee, about whether or not the timing of it, given that the state hospital project probably is coming forward. And this property abuts that, that property. And so the discussion was, well, what would be the relative uses, or keeping the options open for one use or another. If it's one of access, we had discussed the idea of maybe having an easement or something through the property, so that you could connect the fields currently at the Medfield State Hospital property, and it could be one connection, but those are issues that might come up in a planning board or whatever planning board process, where somebody could say, well, we would like to have this or that, or with the Board of Selectmen, that might come up later.
The only thing that, I don't know if you discussed it all, but we've had a lot of discussion on looking at like a master plan of what's going to happen at the hospital, what's going to happen with the so-called Hinckley property that abuts that, and with lot number 3. Was there any discussion of trying to have that idea of a master plan rather than just go with lot number 3 and then we have a master plan? Wouldn't it make more sense to try to kind of combine everything with that?
Well, that's why I brought it up, that there is that question, whether it is, but without knowing what the master plan is, it's hard to know whether or not it's important to wait, for the master plan to be developed. But a couple things to keep in mind is that, of course, first, this is would be at the end of the project, because, it's right next to the Kingsbury Club. And, the question sort of is, well, what would the use be, or, the normal use? It's probably something along the recreational side, because the other uses, certainly at the Medfield State Hospital, there's plenty of land to do other uses that would be proposed. So, but the other thing is on the timeline, maybe the decision doesn't have to be made, even though that you have to put the RFP out there and then proposals come in. Maybe the decision time could be delayed for any one proposal or another. And by that time, that point in time in the future, it's possible that a master plan would be developed, and one would be able to determine whether or not should do this or that, or make it a part of the overall master plan. But it is a question. It's a good question.
And then the last question I had, when you advertise, and I'm not familiar, but you mentioned the central register, are there other avenues that are more outside the immediate region that would be better to advertise than just the central register?
And it would, there are real estate publications, there are recreation publications, if you're looking at recreational uses. It would depend to a certain degree on what the committee and the selectmen viewed as appropriate use for the property, where you might try to solicit information.
Did that come up at all in discussion with the committee?
Well, there was some discussion about it, and I think it kind of relates to your previous question, because it's sort of, what's the master plan look like? Well, if you have, even before the master plan is presented in terms of the state hospital, what you could do is you could really advertise the Ice House property, the RFP, in a number of different publications, with the sole purpose of trying to get as many creative ideas as possible on the desk. And so if you look at, if not at Ice House Road, maybe there's another possibility at the state hospital where if the idea has merit and, you know, it's a way of trying to prime the pump, so to speak, of trying to get things going, because I know the timeline is
Right.
ticking, you know, for the state hospital.
Mark, did you?
Yeah, thanks very much for saying this on. I mean, it's really great, and I like the idea that it's very flexible and fluid, I think, so that, as you talked about, so that you can get a lot of, hopefully get a lot of interest there and a lot of different ideas that maybe you hadn't thought about, as opposed to us being just focused on one thing. Personally, I don't see the relationship or the direct tying necessary for the state hospital property, where it's in the same part of town. I mean, they're physically really not next to each other, and they're kind of, you know, segregated there. I mean, obviously, the access is off of Ice House Road. It's not near the state hospital. And I think, too, as far as you had mentioned, most likely the use for Ice House is going to be looking more towards a recreational, some type of facility there. You know, I think a better use for housing would probably be up at the state hospital, rather than maybe just like putting houses back there next to the Kingsbury Club. So I would kind of hate for us to kind of drag our feet here and not keep moving forward with this RFP while we're waiting for a very involved master plan to be done for the state hospital. And you just kind of wait a whole nother year before we get there. Because I think, as you talked about, I think getting an RFP out, we might get some great ideas and some great things there, and kind of see what looks like for potential there. And I think the town's kind of indicated too, that we've been sitting on this land for way too long, and we've been saying, oh, next year, we'll get to it next year. Well, you know, at some point, we really need to get going. And we've got, you folks are all interested in helping us out, and you've kind of got some great momentum going here, and to me, it doesn't make any sense just to have it kind of sit still, you know what I mean? Now that we've got some good momentum.
Yeah, and the process, and even getting it out immediately, or
Yeah.
as soon as possible, you still have the Board of Selectmen as the option
Oh, yeah.
of negotiating or not.
Right.
You know, in other words,
Right.
you're authorized to do it, but it's, you know, you have to approve of the deal.
Yeah.
You know,
Is there a disadvantage of broadening that area that you're going to advertise for the RFP? Is it?
No, I think actually there might be even more of an advantage to
Okay.
that, too.
Yeah.
You know, because of the
Broadening
reasons we.
The
I-
area of acceptable uses or the land area?
No, I mean to advertise the RFP so that you can get a broader, and I think Ralph made an excellent point, and I think Mark followed with that. Even if that doesn't fit the Ice House Road lot, maybe it would fit something we didn't even think of up at the hospital, so.
Exactly.
That's why I think of the broader the field that you can get would be to our advantage, rather than a narrow field.
I agree. And one of the provisions that might be tweaked here, then, the first part in the overview, it talks about consistent with current zoning and complementary to the surrounding existing establishments. You know, maybe there could be a line that would suggest zoning a change could be considered, or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, just to open it up a little bit more, you know, than it currently is.
No, that's great. Had you folks, I guess, next steps, what was your recommendation, I guess the committee's recommendation on where we should go from here?
Well,
Yeah?
yeah,
Go on.
to issue it, I guess, and get it finalized and issued. This is the draft, but I guess we could, you know, with your suggestions, we could put together a final and send it out with maybe a number of different avenues of
Yeah.
advertising.
The one thing you have to make sure it does go in the central register. We can help you out getting it in there.
Good.
So.
Love it. That's great.
Oh.
So I guess, would we like to make I don't know if we need to make a motion not to authorize them to keep moving forward or not, but I'd like to make that.
Okay, I just wanted, were there any other committee members that wanted to add anything that was not added?
I just urge you to do it.
Okay.
I think I agree with Ralph, that we've waited much too long already. I think it's time to get going.
Excellent.
Okay, was that a motion then, and I'll second that.
Okay, so all in favor?
All in favor? Aye.
Great,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
What
Yep. Just to keep to work on a RFP, final, get a final. Yep.
Are you going to be asking for public input at some point on this?
I don't know. Complain, you do.
So I'm Tim Bonfatti. I'm at 11 Copperwood Road, which is one of the direct abutters of the property. And my neighbors, Greg Hennebre's here, is also a direct abutter. I'll speak for myself, Greg may have some other comments. I don't have a problem with the RFP in general in terms of what's going on with the development. It is a very pronounced presence on our property or on our neighborhood. The building, is significant. It's going to generate a lot of traffic. It's going to change the character, probably more so than the Kingsbury, given the nature of the use for it, at least the way the use is sounding to be. So one of the things that, and I don't think what I'm asking for anyways is that significant, but and I've taken the liberty of kind of doing an aerial view of the property. This is not a surveyed, depiction of the property, but this is an aerial view of the part of the property that is at the end of Copperwood Road, which, as you can see, is a cul-de-sac. So that red line that you see there is essentially our property line. Again, not engineered in any way, but that's from looking at the assessor's map, pretty close to where it is. Then the yellow line is what I understand to be the buffer zone, the 150-foot buffer zone between their property and our property. And then the blue line is what I'd like to talk to you about, is that I would like the RFP not to rely on the planning board process or some other regulatory process, but the RFP to require that a fence be put up along 50 feet in from that buffer zone, and a fairly significant fence. And the things that we're worried about in our neighborhood is, one, sound.
Sure.
Because there's a significant sound generation coming from that. And secondly, the possibility of a cut-through. We're concerned, and I think that this will all have to be sorted out by the planning board, but we're concerned about the parking.
Yes.
And so what we're worried about is people coming down, parking at Copperwood, and walking right through. It's an easy way to do that, to get there if they're backed up out on West Mill. So what I'd like is that the RFP, that way the developer can plan for it in their pro forma. It's not a significant sum, frankly, given the whole cost of the property. I don't know whose that drawing is over there, but I did just check it tonight. And is that drawing, whatever that site plan is, it doesn't appear actually that they're even planning on developing inside that blue line. It looks like that they're maintaining that buffer.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to ask is that the RFP include, language that obligates the successful developer to, and I've drafted some language that there's other ways to do it, and somebody can opine on the language, but that requires the developer to install a 10-foot stockade fence that would basically go along the buffer zone, 50 feet in on the buffer zone, to between all the abutters, the direct abutters, which I think is Greg and myself and perhaps a bit of Joe's property.
Okay.
I've also talked to Chief Kingsbury about this, because I know he has an emergency cut-through at the end of Copperwood, and he's asked that a gate be put on that fence that allows him to maintain that cut-through.
Yeah.
Which he would obviously cut the bolts if he.
And we've done that a number of times.
Yeah, so he doesn't object to the idea of a fence, he just wants to be able to get access into that like he has now. So I would like you to consider this. I don't think it's really a significant stretch for the developer to include, and it would make a fairly significant difference for us in the neighborhood.
Yep.
I think it would do a lot to protect it, so.
Sure.
That's all I had on it.
Greg Henry, I'm at 1 Bishop Lane, and I'm all for the development of the town, and certainly income is great, and the plans to move forward. I think as a father of 4 children, age 6, 5, 3, 2, and one with some physical challenges, my primary concern is safety in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
That area is going to be a cut through for cars, drop off, traffic, etc. Right now that area is open, so our children actually can walk back there, and there's nothing there, so they actually can get through.
Yeah.
And my concern would be is if they snuck back there and actually were hitting, going into oncoming traffic of a parking lot, whatever that use would be, recreational, anything that it certainly opens up to a safety issue. Having 4 kids is busy enough, but to actually be at the end of a cul-de-sac and have to worry about the safety of your children and looking out there all the time is certainly an area that concerns me. So I ask, that we just take into consideration that, we're in a pre-RFP mode. We're in a mode that we can dictate terms as town people. The developers can incorporate those costs and those plans in their responses, and everyone will be on a level playing field. And I just ask that we take that due diligence when we go ahead and issue the RFP.
John Day on Miller Street, and I'm on the Economic Development Committee. I would say just one thing to consider, that we may be cart before the horse here with what type of proposals come in, and so to have requirements of developers before proposals are in, that perhaps this could be covered with, as Mr. Sullivan said, putting in a weight factor of neighborhood conditions and also some suggested potential regulations and considerations that are weighed by the committee and by the selectmen in that RFP, so that if you get an equestrian facility that would be a good proposal, or some other type of proposal that's not 400 cars and a large building, that there are other considerations and uses that may come in. So in requiring a 10-foot fence that may have wetland condition issues because you have animals traveling through and other things, are there other types of buffers? And so is it put in as a consideration and something that will be weighed and factored based on the neighbors in the town versus a requirement? So sometimes requirements can be hamstringing versus considerations. Yeah, I just don't think you know what type of proposals are coming in yet. So a requirement for a fence like that may have wider ranging implications. So that would be my only comment.
I just would like to comment quickly on that. I think that what we don't want actually is to get this thrown into a bunch of judgment factors, frankly, because that's exactly what we'd be concerned that some other judgment might, elevate beyond the protection of the neighborhood. I don't think we're asking for a lot. I think the fence is really good neighborly policy, something we try to do in the town, frankly, in all the projects that I'm involved in the town with. So I think that I would rather not, with all due respect, leave it to the judgment of whether or not, the economic benefit is greater than the fence, or, that's why we've made the conscious decision to have it as part of the RFP as opposed to going through and having it go through a process. It's not a lot to ask. We're not really impinging the economic viability. Certainly if there were, I'm not sure I would see that, but if there were Conservation Commission issues, we would gladly work through that somehow, I'm pretty sure. But if we don't include it, then it does open the risk that it gets brought into a broader evaluation factor and the fence doesn't become a condition. So we want it as a condition, our neighbors.
Is there anyone else who wants to speak on this? Go ahead, sir.
Hey, I'm John Neal, and I'm on Copperwood also, number 7. I happen to be in commercial real estate. If you guys need any help, there are some good databases that are easy to get it in, no charge. It's very easy to promote this if you want to give it some time. There was some discussion about the time. Nobody's going to give this any serious consideration if you put a 30 or a 45-day time limit on it. It's just not time to put together, without the head start that these other guys have, any kind of competing proposal that's going to be able to hit all the qualifications. The real thing I want to talk about, though, is whether or not anybody has looked at or considered taking back some of the land from the Kingsbury Club. The concern that I see, we were talking about it earlier, it came up, the financing difficulty of financing on leased land. That's hard enough. But when you see the plan that's in the back there, actually most of the building, more than half the building is on Kingsbury land. Most of the parking is on Kingsbury, and forever links those two projects together. If Kingsbury fails, the developer here is going to be forced to come in and buy out the Kingsbury Club to protect his interest on that land. Likewise, if this thing fails and you got this building, they're kind of forever linked. And it seems that Kingsbury's not using that land. Whoever gets this, if they do a deal with Kingsbury, they're going to be paying rent to Kingsbury Club to get that land from them. I think that the committee should take a serious look at getting that land in advance so that they can offer the developer 5, 6, 7 good acres, because as I understand now, there's only 2 or 3 acres of buildable area there. So if Kingsbury's doesn't want to go along with it, we're not going to get anything else that's really viable there because of the wetlands, the setback, the buffers, all of that stuff. It's a very difficult piece of land to do anything with, and I think we've heard that from a lot of people. So that's my suggestion, that maybe just slow down a little bit and look at getting control of the land that you need to do a good project there, and not just rely on the one party who's got a deal worked out with Kingsbury. So Thank you.
Mike, financially, do you see any issues with his proposal?
Not being in commercial real estate, I don't understand, I don't totally understand how financing decisions are made. I think the difficulty of not subordinating the lease to the mortgage will present some problems in the financing. But, you know, it's what the market will bear and what the proposals are and what the relationship is between the developer and the financial institution. So it could be a problem, but there are a couple of other things I think the neighbors might want to take a look at as well that perhaps should be, I don't know, included in the RFP or as part of negotiations. One of them, I think, would be directional lighting. I think even more than the fence, I think you want to make sure that however the property is lit, it does not impinge on the neighborhood, that its faces away from the property. The other thing probably would be some restriction on the hours of operation, so it doesn't become a 24-hour facility, that there are some limitations as to when the facility operates. There are a couple of things that you ought to be aware of in terms of the zoning of this. The reason for that, the land between the red line and the yellow line is under the zoning, wherever there is a industrial use abutting a residential use, it requires a 150-foot buffer, 100 feet of which must be heavily landscaped.
Yep.
Within that 100 feet, currently, there is the Bay Circuit Trail. And that's part of that system that goes sort of like an inner belt recreational strip that runs between 128 495. That runs through the state hospital property, through McCarthy Park, and down the strip of land, and then eventually goes behind the old landfill, through the cemetery, and down into Noon Hill. So it's important to know that part of that 100-foot buffer strip will be the Bay Circuit Trail.
But not the area that is by the abutters of Copperwood. That'd be up further, wouldn't it be?
No, it's this whole, yeah, it runs right by the abutter. It runs from McCarthy Park all the way to
Runs
to
parallel,
West Mill Street.
coming down on that, runs
Yeah.
parallel to that red line?
Right, yeah.
So,
I
but,
mean, it doesn't have to be a 30-foot trail. It could be a 5-foot trail, you know. It's just so that people can, who want to hike it or whatever, have the ability.
I don't think it's in the woods there.
Well, see, this is part of the developable land. I think the logical area for it to be would be in the, yeah. I don't think it's that specific right now, because I know there's a group that's been working on it that came in to see me. They wanted to talk to the Council on Aging about running it behind the senior center.
Yeah,
I
obviously,
but I-
what we're talking about preserving is this protected landscape, so if
Right.
they want to run the Bay Circuit and between the yellow and the blue.
Well, under the zoning, between the yellow and the blue, they are not allowed to have buildings on it, but
Right.
they are allowed to use it for parking or roadways.
Right, right.
So that can be, and the idea of the Bay Circuit Trail is to have it somewhat natural state. So I don't think you want to run it through a parking lot or a driveway, so logically it would be to have it somewhere through
Yeah,
there
I mean, our
in an 100-foot
concern
strip.
would be
just, can we just use the mic on, because people at home can't hear you?
Our concern as an abutter would be that if you preserve a cut around the fence, then obviously it's going to defeat the purpose of the fence.
Right.
So that would be the basic concern of doing that. I do think there's, you know, if the Economic Development Committee, to Mike's larger point, that they're, you know, we are abutters, we're pretty significantly impacted by it. If they wanted to meet with a group of abutters and we could talk about these issues in the Economic Development Committee, I'd be glad to, we could be glad to do that.
Yeah.
As opposed to taking up
Yeah.
your time here to talk about.
Ralph, do you want to respond? Is that something you want to?
We did have some discussions in the Economic Development Committee about the surrounding area. In fact, in the selection criteria number 10, we had, I'll read it to you, the degree to which the proposed addresses the aesthetic and operational concerns of the town, and in particular, the surrounding neighborhood. Now, the thought was, you know, there is a concern about what the neighbors, how neighborhoods are going to be impacted. So what, whether it be a fence, a wooden fence, a green fence or something, but, you know, I think when it goes to planning board, having this wording in there leaves open the opportunities to speak to whatever the developer or project proposal is proposing for a fence or whatever it is on that side, or however they're going to protect, you know, the privacy, or, you know, lessen the noise, or the impact of the lighting. You know, that might be a planning board issue that could be brought up. But what we would want to do is get something into the RFP that would make it clear. This is fairly clear, but maybe it can be more clear, or, you know, that there is a concern for the immediate abutting neighborhood, rather than surrounding neighborhoods, you know, which is a little more nebulous.
As long as the abutters maintain, you know, when I'm nervous, I think I've been very clear. I don't want a separate group of people deciding what the abutters,
Yes.
and factoring it in amongst a group of other decisions or other factors in the proposal. I don't think this is a lot to ask for, what we're talking about. It's not a lot of money, for sure. It certainly can work within their development pro forma. If it wanted to be, you know, sort of softened to say that the abutter could, the developer could propose an alternate to this that was acceptable to the abutters, that would be fine. I don't mind that. But I just don't want it to get into where it's in part of a broader discussion about, you know, concern for abutters and economic viability and uses in the town. That's why it's so specific. It's intentionally specific.
Or at the end of the surrounding neighborhood, that perhaps may include a fence, you know, with the abutting neighborhood.
Yeah, but May is one. I've been involved in these kinds of RFPs, so I know exactly what the game is about with them, and I think that it's important that the developer know very clearly what their responsibilities are under the RFP, so they can propose accordingly. If they come and say, I have an alternate plan that accomplishes what you are trying to accomplish with the fence, and as long as the decision-making is kept with the abutters, then I don't have a problem with looking at alternate plans.
Would you be willing, I think you made a good suggestion, would you be willing to meet with, you'd be able to organize a group of the abutters, and would you be willing with the economic development, and to iron these out? I personally have no, myself, issue with that. I think that's a very fair, something to put in, as far as concerning the fence. But I think if we could work these issues out between the Economic Development Committee, and then you could come back with that. Paul?
I've been on the Economical Development Committee when we brought Kingsbury Club in. That is the last piece of industrial property that we have, which was bought for that. And we took under a lot of consideration the way we put out the RFP, so it would be leased to the town rather than sold to a business who could then put anything he wanted in if he bankrupted. Unfortunately, we had the YMCA come in. They wasted time for about 1.5 years on us. You've got tracks going around there. We had a hard time getting anybody to come in. But once the Kingsbury Club came in, then we decided to move on and try to get the last piece of industrial property, get some business for the town. And by leaving that open RFP going out, the main idea was to get as many ideas in of somebody that might be interested. And I'm willing to bet we're not going to get more than 2. But it'd be nice if we got 10 or 20, but you got the tracks here, you got, you know, the wetlands behind it. And what we're doing is we're doing Lot 3, which was zoned for it. We don't want to upset the neighbors, but I'd be more worried about the Hinckley property behind you on Bishop, because the town can do whatever they want with that. That was not bought for conservation. That could go housing, it could go town garage, whatever. But it's not gonna, because they already built that. But if we don't do an RFP, and if we put too many things, that meant we bought that industrial property for nothing. I mean, we're buying all this property with things to do originally, and now you throw in all these things to discourage people, and the town gets no benefit from it.
Well, I don't know, I mean, the Board of Selectmen clearly supports what you're doing, and we just voted to
But
do
if you
that.
put too much on, we've had open meetings for the last year at our downstairs. Where's everybody been? They're all
Well,
posted.
I don't know if too much is one fence, but the only point is, are you opposed to meeting with the abutters and talking with
I'm not
them?
opposed to meeting,
Okay.
I'm just saying we've been meeting for a year.
Well, I don't think you've met with the abutters yet, have you?
They've never come.
Never been in a meeting.
Okay, well, maybe, well, just a second. Maybe, just a second, please. Maybe if we reach out, okay, make that extra step to the abutters, we call it one meeting, let's hear what the abutters have to say. This board has just voted to go ahead and issue the RFP. We're fully in support. We want that land. It's an economic, as you said, the last piece of industrial land. Taxes are rising. This is something we're pushing, so in full support. You have no argument there. The only question is, can we just sit down with the Economic Development Committee and the abutters and see if what their issues are, and then come back with the recommendation? I don't know, Mark, if you have
Yeah, I
issues with
think we'd
that.
probably like to see one more iteration, maybe of the RFP after you've had a chance to chat with the abutters and really get their concerns addressed, because they're going to obviously be significantly impacted. And then I'd feel comfortable with that, and that would be great.
Well, this is a draft.
Yeah, yeah. That'd be great.
Okay.
The selectmen still have last word.
Right.
Oh, yeah,
On
yeah.
regardless what, you don't have to
No,
even
no.
take whoever comes in. You can just knock it down.
Okay, any further discussion, because why don't we leave it that the Economic Development Committee will get with the abutters. Any just final words with that?
I'm Gil Rogers, and I just want to reinforce a point that Mike brought up, that the Bay Circuit Trail System is a route all around Boston, from the North Shore all the way down to Duxbury. And as Mike said, the Bay Circuit route goes right through that property, right through that area, and is used a lot for hiking, and it shouldn't be blocked. It shouldn't be interfered with. The other thing that I'd like to point out is the Norfolk Hunt Club rides through that trail, and and it's a main connector between the steeplechase and the Medfield State Hospital. So it's an important route for the Hunt Club. So I'd be careful not to put a fence up or to block that or to make it impossible to be used.
They ride on the Bay Circuit Trail?
Yeah.
I believe our next Economic Development Committee meeting is July 10th, which is a Thursday, so
Thursday,
perhaps it's a second Thursday, so July 10th.
That'd
But
be
I think perhaps also to your point, having that meeting and having some input and feedback also allows for a smoother transition on the other side of any good proposals, so that
Exactly.
there is not this conversation on the other side of it, and then we have to go back to the drawing board and rehash these things. So it can't hurt to sit and talk about it and weigh those factors.
I agree.
Is that July or June 10th?
July 10th.
July 10th.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, excellent.
Okay, Ralph, is that something you can reach out with the abutters and work with that?
Good.
Okay.
All right, good.
Okay, anything else? Yes, sir.
Joe Saramosa on the Economic Development Committee. I guess the other point is we probably should reach out to somebody on the Bay Circuit Trail too, so I don't know. Gil, are you on it? So we should probably invite them as well, so.
Be good. Excellent. Good. Thank you all. Thanks very much for coming. We
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thanks for all your work so far. It's been terrific. Thank
I do
you.
have one question. Bob Callahan, also on the committee. Just a question has to do with the current property that Kingsbury owns. And it seems like there's an area of land they haven't used. And through Scuttlebutt, it seems like the one proposal out there that some of the town members actually thought they were voting on included something going on where he's going to have to do a lease or sublease of that land. So back to making it a viable option, okay? That current property is kind of small, and Kingsbury's not using that. Our committee can't go to Kingsbury and say, you know, we want that land back, but can the selectmen go to Kingsbury and say, you haven't used the land, we would like to make this parcel of land more, or I guess, more opportunistic for someone to come in and develop it?
You could ask,
He can say no.
yes.
No. I would assume they would say no. Yeah.
He had plans for a pool down there, too.
His pool's on the other side.
Yeah.
Yeah, the pool's at the other end, down towards the cul-de-sac.
I think that's something we could explore. I suppose we could ask.
I mean, it's a challenge, because what you're gonna get to, Paul's point is, you wanna make this a viable piece of property. Right now, if you look at it, the property lines are not a viable piece of property. So someone who comes in there is gonna have to deal with their neighbor to make it viable.
Well, yeah, and I think, and there's no reason why any potential developer that's interested in doing thing wouldn't place a phone call to the Kingsbury Club and then see what's up. I'm sure that's what they would be doing. That's what I would do. Yeah, yeah.
The other thing to keep in mind is the Kingsbury Club has a non-compete clause in their lease, so that they don't get undermined by anyone going in there that would provide direct competition to them. So they have the right of refusal on any other use there.
Debbie Barrow, Copper Road, and sorry, but so if an RFP at some point in time is issued, and you get proposals that are contingent upon the acquisition through lease or exchange transfer somehow from the Kingsbury Club, then what really is the legal status of that proposal if it's based on a contingency that no one has any?
Well, there are two conditions, as I see it, and Ms. Town Council points out I'm not a lawyer, so take that a grain of salt. But the first one is that they would need to have some sort of an agreement with the Kingsbury Club, that the Kingsbury Club is willing to lease the land to them. The second is that under the lease agreement between the town and the Kingsbury Club, any subleasing of Kingsbury Club property requires approval of the Board of Selectmen.
Right, and I understand that, but my question is if those two pieces aren't in, well, if the piece with the Kingsbury Club, with whatever agreement there might be with the Kingsbury Club, isn't in place before they submit a proposal for consideration by the town, then what value or legitimacy is the proposal? It's based on a contingency that no one can really control. So
Well, I would think they would present it as part of their proposal, that they've worked that out. I mean, that's what I would assume, that's part of their plan. I mean, that's what I would expect.
Right, which may never come to fruition. So I guess my point is that, in looking at all of this, that the sort of, the looking ahead a couple of steps, I think makes a little bit of sense. And doing the planning makes a little bit of sense. And I think that a comprehensive approach, and I understand that the RFP has attempted to do that, and it has put in its language to the little bit that I've read it, in very sort of broad and general terms. But I don't know that number one, protects the neighborhood when an RFP is so broad and so general. And number two, there are all of these sort of unknowns that can ultimately impact anything that you get. So a lot of time and effort can be spent on something that never really moves forward. And my final two pieces would be that I do see that I live in the neighborhood. I know that this parcel links to the state hospital. I can cross-country ski out my back door and ski right up to the state hospital. It is a really beautiful, valuable piece of property, and I really strongly urge you to take into consideration that I think at town meeting there was discussion of $50,000 of revenue per year for this possibly parcel based on this particular plan. It is such a small amount in the context of what could be built, what could be envisioned, keeping the Bay Circuit path, linking all of this, and creating something that's wonderful, maybe beyond what we can even imagine right now, but works for the town. So in closing, there are environmental resources out there that need to be protected. There's a vernal pool, there's a stream, there are wetlands, and this plan that you have before you so far doesn't take those into consideration particularly. It overburdens the site. So I think that the RFP should include some thresholds for environmental concerns, or at least list that as something that the developer or project applicant should be attentive to. And finally, as I said, I just urge you to really think carefully and thoughtfully about this. I know a lot of work's gone into it, but a lot has changed in the last year too. We just, along the road to acquiring the state hospital property pending some legislation. So a lot has changed in a year's time, and that has not been factored into completely the RFP. So,
Okay, thank you. And we'll have the Economic Development Committee and the abutters get together, and then they'll report back. Okay, thanks very much for coming in. I missed you, Mr. Peterson.
Well, thank you for taking care of things without me. The next item on the agenda for us is to discuss member appointments to the State Hospital Redevelopment Master Plan Committee, discuss the draft missions statement for the State Hospital Redevelopment Master Plan Committee. And there's a number of people that have indicated a desire to serve on the Master Planning Committee. And we have a draft mission statement that was circulated by Christine and Sarah Raposa, the town planner. Somewhere, there was a new name that was added since around 5 o'clock this afternoon.
Pat Casey?
No, Pat was on my list, but there's a
John Didi.
John Didi. Yeah, and did he submit some materials, or?
He hasn't submitted, he was recommended by, I'm trying to think of who it was, but someone else that was recommended for the committee suggested him as a potential member. I believe his background is a planner.
Okay.
Lives on
And Mr.
Stagecoach.
Chairman, I had also sent in saying that if asked, Dave Perini also would be willing to serve.
Okay.
I did
There was an
speak
issue with town council saying that Dave Perini would, in town council's opinion, would have a conflict of interest. I guess my reaction to town council saying that is that that's really Mr. Perini's conflict to mention, rather than the town's.
Yeah, I
issue?
spoke to town council this morning, and he said he thought there was some prohibition that if you had been involved in the, just an item as a member of the state government, you were prohibited from participating in another governmental body making a decision on that, but I can ask him for clarification on that.
I wouldn't understand that. I mean, it's a town, he's now a resident in the town.
Well, I think the whole theory behind that, and I don't think it applies in the situation here, but if you've got, say, a member of the state legislature who's involved in a decision to sell a piece of land, and then
They work on the
all of a sudden he's
redevelopment.
working for the developer that's developing a piece of land.
Yeah, but he was not an elected official or anything.
No, he's an appointed official, but you could
Right.
say the same thing with a appointed official. And as I said, I don't think it applies here, but it's why those prohibitions are put in place to avoid sort of the backroom dealings that have been known occasionally to happen in state government. So.
Yeah, but I don't see how that applies here. Can we get, is there an actual law that says that we can look at rather than just?
I think it's probably a policy of the Inspector General or whoever, I'll ask town council to.
If he can show something specific that legally says that.
Okay.
And certainly Mr. Perini has the sort of background and experiences that would make him invaluable to this committee, so that if he'd be willing to serve, it'd be great to have him. So maybe that's the sort of thing that we can hold off on
Sure.
actually appointing him tonight, or not appointing him, and make a determination about that issue, whether it's something that's going to be preclusive of his serving. And
Appointments tonight? Are you confirming appointments tonight, this evening?
that's my expectation. Do you guys have the different expectation?
I'd kind of like to see who's on the committee.
Well, I can read the names. Steve Nolan, Ken Richard, Jim Ronstock, Ralph Costello, Teresa James, Randy Carg, Gil Rogers, Chip Wakely, Pat Casey, Frank Perry, and I'm looking.
You mentioned a John Didi, which I don't know, yeah.
Who?
Did you say there was a John, some new name?
Deady.
Yeah, we don't know anything about him and
No.
and whether he's really interested, so.
Yeah.
Um, Roz?
I'm on the fence.
Okay, so Roz is out.
A 10-foot fence? Okay, yes,
We can give you a buffer zone if you want.
And Mr. Chairman, the only other thing I would throw out is, should we have a member of the planning board on that as well, since that's their function to
Yeah, that
be
would be great.
planning in town?
I had spoken to John Harney, and he had suggested very strongly that we try to recruit Steve Brown for it, but,
Well, there could also be some advisory capacity, because I know
Yeah.
Alex had sent us an email that he was, he wouldn't mind helping out, Alex Stevens, but he didn't think he could have the commitment for being, you know.
I'm
for-
sorry,
for
who was
the-
this?
Alex Stevens, so.
Oh,
that-
yeah,
you know what I mean? So we might have a couple of those advisory
And Ross has
positions.
indicated that as well. that
So
she
we
would
might
very
have some of
willing
those
to help.
advisory things, you
The
know.
one thing with the planning board too, and I again, this is something town council will have to review, but is a member of the planning board, are they gonna have to make a decision on a special permit for site plan review?
But Steve Nolan's on the ZBA, doesn't the same logic apply for that?
Well, he wouldn't, it's only a three-member panel, so he wouldn't necessarily be on the panel making the decision, so.
Seems to me
I- you know, just-
I'm not arguing against
No, I don't, yeah.
Mr. Nolan, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I do want to make a comment. At several meetings, I had suggested that we ought to determine the list of the qualifications of the kind of people that we need. I believe that Mr. Harney may have written a couple letters along those lines. And the reason I asked about whether you're going to be voting tonight on that list is I have no idea how those people got on the list, whether any of those people are in fact representative of the desires of the committee to say this is the kind of talent that we need on the committee. One of the things that I had mentioned previously was that you should be looking for someone, or at least a list of the key kinds of people that other towns found, that Gill found or that Ross found in going to the other towns as being instrumental in their development programs. And did they need somebody who was an expert in finding funding within other agencies in Massachusetts? Or did they need someone who was an expert in finance or some? And I just, from the list of names that you just read, I mean, I recognize a couple of the names, but I'm not sure whether those people bring that kind of, I mean, you're looking for, I would hope, a studied decision on each of the individuals that are there and what they bring to it. I mean, I read your mission statements, which I think is fine. I thought that was, an appropriate mission statement, but some of the things that are called out there would seem to indicate people that I don't see represented on that list. For example, you're looking for diversity of uses. I didn't see anybody there who was interested in community-supported agriculture. So I guess I'm looking for assurances from the selectmen that you've looked at the requirements of the kinds of people that could best serve on this committee as opposed to just volunteers, and that you've made that selection. And I don't get that feeling from the list that was just read. I'm sorry.
Do you have any suggestions as to who you would recommend?
Well, I think I've laid it out. I mean, who did
In terms of
Northampton,
names,
what kind of person did Northampton find most valuable in their activity? And now, if it was somebody from an economic development committee, or it was someone, David Perini, I think, is an excellent candidate, and assuming that he can meet the whether it's a non-compete kind of requirement or whatever, a non-conflict of interest. I mean, here's someone who's familiar with state government and the workings in state government, and may very well be able to get a track on the kinds of funding that might be available. We're going to be looking for infrastructure kinds of loans and everything else. I think you need somebody like that. I think he's an excellent example there. John Thompson and I have offered, I think, to be in the advisory committees and not sit, on the main committee, and that's still there.
Thank you very much.
We've been trying to reach out. I've been calling people, trying to get people to volunteer for the committee, and it's difficult, to get the people with the particular skills that are willing to commit the time and can commit the time. So
I can just elaborate on what we learned from conversations with these other hospitals, the kind of people. And I'd put it in the letter. That's how I based the comments that I had in the letter that I wrote last week. But what's important is a developer that's had broad experience and a track record in actually doing these types of projects. Somebody that brings that, expertise and experience in. And particularly if it's a multi-use, multi-level housing, it's somebody that has that kind of track record that's actually done that. The second thing that seemed to be important, and at Northampton, they had a woman by the name of Beth Murphy who worked for Mass Development. And she had, all the connections kind of with the state government, funding sources. She knew Mass Development, so she knew how to get funding out of them. She had contacts with the different departments in Mass Development, like in contracting, had contracting experience, that type of thing. And I think from Northampton, she was kind of critical in making that happen.
Gil, was she a paid staff person, or was she a community volunteer?
She was paid by Mass Development.
Well, there we go.
Mass Development. One of the recommendations.
And she's
I
still at
had-
Mass Development, isn't she?
Yes.
Yeah, so that we could ask if we could get her involved.
And I think, irrespective of if we use Mass Development or not, that'd be extremely useful to have her come in, because she's been through this, you know, and she knows what's involved. The other kinds of things that were important were, and they don't have to be on the committee, but because this is a historical site with historic buildings and with registrations, and that has to be dealt with, you want somebody that can, you know, like Mike Taylor or somebody like that, that can be involved with this. Doesn't have to be on the committee, but should be, you know, kind of like an advisor to the committee, but involved in it all the time. So the committee doesn't go down the, you know, a path that really starts to conflict with these sorts of constraints. And the other thing is the point that I think somebody made about planning, is that to make this successful, you have to create a zoning district, a special zoning district for this. And so you want to have, again, somebody from the planning board either on the committee or, you know, actively working with the planning, throughout the planning process. And I think the other point that was made is that, for example, in Foxborough, the point that came out there that was very important was that somebody, I think it was the town planner, played a very aggressive, active role in it. Not a passive role, but very active in promoting it, or a selectman, you know, but somebody that's sort of the champion of it, that it took to make those things happen. And we saw that at many of the, I think most of all the hospitals had that point, that somebody at the most senior level in the town has to be the champion of this and push all the time to make it happen. If it just goes along as kind of a passive role, it loses the momentum, it loses the focus. So I would say you want a strong person, maybe one of you, that can actually take that leadership role in it, and that's important, and that seemed to make it happen. And then the other is fundraising, which you've already mentioned. And for example, the woman that we met that's the planner in Foxborough, she considered herself an expert, I guess is the better way of putting it, at fundraising, but knew all the different sources, you know, at the state and some at federal, and went after those grants and, you know, those funds.
Did those people get either state or federal monies for their redevelopments?
Yeah.
They did.
Yeah.
Was it significant money?
Preservation, they got preservation money too. That, in Foxborough, they had accepted that. And I don't know if that's being considered here, but both in our conversations in Northampton and in Foxborough, they brought up the point.
Historic tax credits?
Yeah, have we explored that for the town?
Yep.
Well, I just think, just to respond to Bill, myself, I listened very carefully at the last meeting when the State Hospital Committee gave us a lot of advice, and they stated what type of skills, what type of professions should be on the committee. And I took that, and I took the points that were listed under the mission statement, and I went through the individuals that had sent something in, and I also scanned individuals that I knew throughout the community, some of which, unfortunately, because of full-time job commitments, could do something, but not on a full-time basis. And that seemed to be one of the things that the committee said, if somebody's going to be on this committee, you know, they're going to have the time to, you know, be able to put in on that committee. So, I mean, I did indeed take the statements of that committee, and then I took the statements that were here, and I tried to match up with the individuals, and I thought we came, at least my own list here, came up to filling what was on the suggestions by the committee and what was on the listings here under our mission statement, so.
Well, the other thing too, I thought with this point, we were going to rely on a, rather than trying to get a committee to do so much work that we've asked our committees to do in the past, that we were going to now rely on a number of master planning firms to do a lot of the work and have their experts do it, and the committee was going to be more of a guidance role as opposed to really crunching through all the numbers. There's way too much to ask for folks to do that, and that we were going to rely on some real professional help at this point with advice from Sarah and Christine and Michael and stuff, so that this, like I said, this committee would not have to have quite as much of a role. And I think the whole point is, we have to be careful that we just, we work with who we've got here, and I think it'll work out fine with a lot of our volunteers here. And like I said, rely on more professional help this round.
And something like
Yeah.
mass development and others that you mentioned, I think
Yeah.
are sources we can go to.
Yeah.
Christine was going to talk to, I think, some of the key players at the other towns and was going to make some kind of a, rather than bringing them in, she thought that would be too much of a burden on the people in the other towns. And
Yeah, well, I think you probably want to bring them in once you get a committee going. The committee probably
Yeah.
needs to sit down with people like that and talk about their experiences and, sort of absorb their experiences as part of the process.
But I don't think we've heard back from Christine about that yet.
No.
But I'm sure between Chris and Sarah, they have the
Yeah.
contacts.
Sure.
They're both
We'll figure it out.
planning fields, so.
I would follow up on one of Gil's comments and also on that suggestion made by John Harney regarding David Perini. And Mike, I guess you're going to check on that. And I would also suggest that since the planning board will play a big role in this, and what Gil's talking about is the overlay district, which obviously was put in place in Danvers, and some preliminary discussions were held here about our need for an overlay district, that you would need someone from the planning board. I'd suggest that Stephen Brown might be a good.
He worked on the zoning in the past, on the state hospital, so that he'd be an excellent person to tap for it.
No reason why he couldn't be in advisory capacity if he didn't feel he had the need to
Yeah,
be able
as
to do
well,
it
yeah.
full-time. Yeah, I mean, I don't think we have to, I don't know, maybe we do. This isn't it forever. If we decide on these people, that's it, they're stuck for life. We can't add anyone, they can't come off or anything else like that. So there's no reason why it can't be a little bit of a fluid process as time goes on, because things are gonna happen and stuff like that, so.
So in terms of figuring out how to go forward, I was going to suggest maybe that we use the methodology that we used, Mike, at one point, and Mark, to do what committee was that? It was the bylaw committee, where the selectmen ranked their choices
Yeah.
from one to the bottom, and then
We get them all into,
Mike just
correlates them.
And so then if we decide,
That's a good way to do it, yeah.
my thought was that the numbers that I heard at the meeting last week were, I think, 7 to 9, 8 to 10.
Yeah.
I'm happy to have the committee be up to 10 people. And so I would suggest that each of us do that ranking. Are you following what, because you didn't do it? What we did was each one of the 3 selectmen ranked their choices, and then Mike just gave them numbers and we saw
Tabulated them all.
who ended up being on the committee.
One is worth a 10, and 2 is
Yeah.
worth a 9, and whatnot, so, yeah.
I'm just trying to think if there's a downside to that. There's no discussion or,
Well, why don't we do that as a first cut, and then we'll circulate that, and then we'll have a
We'll
discussion at our next meeting.
Yeah, we definitely have to have that as far as what's going on. But I think we need to, because otherwise, we're gonna be here till midnight as we argue. Well, what do you think about Pat? I don't know, yeah, he's, maybe, I mean, we're gonna be
Yeah.
here forever.
Yeah,
And that's
so
what I think
that's-
we found out last time when we were trying to nominate a
Right.
big committee.
Yeah.
And that seemed to work out.
I think it does simplify the process, and it shows if there's a grouping around a candidate,
And stuff like
if there's
that.
Yeah.
a consensus, so.
but can I, not to berate things here, but one of the things you mentioned was that it was suggested to have a citizen at large.
They're all citizens. I'm not quite sure what that means.
I'm not quite sure what that means either. Just a person from the community that's not necessarily tied in. Why was that even put in there?
Yeah,
I don't know, it's in the draft, it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be in the final.
Right.
It's fairly common if you've got a group that's considered of board members from other boards and
Yeah,
committees.
oh, I see what you mean, yeah.
Then at least have somebody who isn't from another town board.
Okay, well, as a first rank, I can go along with that. So you want us to rank these 1 to 10.
Well, yeah, why don't we do 1 to 10?
9?
1 to
I have
1 to
I
10?
make up a chart and send it out to you, and then
Okay.
you can just fill
Okay.
it in and.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's easier.
Yeah, and then we'll discuss it at the next meeting.
And then we need to resolve whether Stephen Brown and David Perini are on that list.
Yep.
Did you guys get, I sent you notice that Frank Perry wanted to be on the list?
No, thank you, I didn't know that, but that's great, thank you. Good notice.
That was a late call this afternoon
Yep.
when I was calling around people to see if they wanted
Okay.
to serve. And are we okay with the draft mission statement? I thought that was good.
I thought that was very good.
I have a few comments on the mission statement.
Can we just hear from up here
Yeah,
first?
The only, I thought it was fine, the only other thing I would either add to mission statement or add as perhaps a bullet point below that, was that this will bring civic pride for our town for generations to come. That it's, whatever ends up there is gonna be something that the town of Medfield is very proud of for generations to come.
Okay,
Okay.
all right, you'll give that wording to Evelyn and Mike or whoever.
Okay.
And anything else, Mark?
No, I liked it.
Richard,
I thought
you
it was
all set?
really good.
Roz?
Roz Smythe, North Street. I think this is a great mission statement. I had a few things I would suggest that might be added in. Under committee appointments, under the second bullet point, I think it might be very useful to include also someone who has either website expertise or public outreach expertise.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because,
That's Alex Stevens, and we got him on our
And he's,
resource team.
Yeah, but-
he's committed to do that, yeah.
I think it's good to have it written in there to remind the members that if you don't have someone with that expertise on the committee, it's still part of their mission to get the word out in whatever way possible.
That's a great idea, thank you.
On the last bullet point of the committee appointments, I suggest, committee will engage with the assistance of a multidisciplinary master planning firm as well as utilize existing town hall staff. Perhaps something could be added in, also working with either mass development or state organizations as well. And implicit in that is not only using the expertise of mass development, but also sources of funding. I don't know how you want to include that in the master plan, but I think putting into searching in types of funding is important. Let me know when to go on.
Go ahead.
Okay. Under the second mission, under the mission statement itself, under the third bullet point, just a point of interest, what is C3? I'm not familiar with that particular.
I think that's a designation of one of the buildings.
It is.
There were 4 buildings that were going to be, building committees.
No, I see.
It's one of the 4 that was gonna be evaluated.
Is
I
it
don't know which one it is.
Why wouldn't you
off the top of my
list all
head.
4? Why they just list that one?
Pardon?
Wouldn't you list all 4? Why is it just the C3?
Utilize the building to determine potential reuse for the
No, I think that's the name of the company. Is that the company?
That's what I'm wondering. Is C3 a company?
I think it's the
C3 was the
The
company.
company.
That was doing it, there you go.
It's doing it, yeah.
Okay, and
Evaluation of the buildings.
that is the company that's going to do 4 of the buildings, correct?
Yes.
That's my understanding.
Is
yeah.
there, now I'm just asking a point, and maybe this would be for the master planning committee. Would there ever be a study done of the additional buildings after C3 comes in?
Maybe.
I think that Jim Ronstock the other night mentioned that he was suggesting extrapolating from the initial 4, so that if the buildings are so bad, and that was what I heard from his idea, that if the buildings are so bad as we expect that they're going to be, that maybe we don't want to spend the $250,000 to study them all to determine that they're so bad that we can't use them. But yes, we need a lot better data.
I don't know the answer to that, but my little gut instinct as a citizen at large, because I don't have any expertise in all of the stated things here, is that if you take 4 people out of 22 and you go, these 3 look alike, or I don't know if that's a really valid way to approach these buildings. That's just my personal opinion, but I just wondered what C3 was. And then the other thing I don't see in the mission statement that might want to be mentioned is something that Bill Massaro alluded to, is look at alternative uses for the property, because there's a lot of discussion which the town is advocating for, for housing that is affordable. But, and I'm listening to the talk about the last remaining commercial zone piece of property in Medfield on Ice House Road. And what's not to say that perhaps part of the Medfield State Hospital property couldn't have some kind of...
It's already zoned business industrial.
Yeah, I mean, why are we cutting off our nose to spite our face and already saying this is what it's going to be? I'm not against the housing, but in 94 acres, maybe there's room for some other type of building that could happen there. And I think that type of investigative work needs to be mentioned in the mission statement.
Yep. Okay.
I'd like
Rose, can you give Evelyn and Mike copies of your edits so that we'll have
Sure.
them to... Thank you.
I just wanted to add just briefly to Roz's comment about the building inspections and everything else. We're currently in the process, and we keep slipping the data when we're going to do it, but just about every drawing ever associated with the hospital is right now stored in the engineering building. And the town is making plans with DCAM to go in and capture those drawings and take those drawings out of those buildings. What I don't think anybody has done anytime soon is to see what other things might be in some of those buildings that are of value. There certainly may be architectural elements within some of the buildings. Now, normally, if it were one building or whatever, I might say, well, when you get the bids, if you decide to demolish it or whatever, presumably you'll get a net bid from the developer who will take out, the demolisher who will say, I can use X number of the bricks, and therefore I gave you a credit for X number of dollars or Y number of dollars in there. But it might be well worthwhile to go through and also do what kinds of equipment are being left behind in those buildings that might be of some value either to the town or to a third party.
In part of my due diligence this afternoon, I called John Harney to talk to him about what we were doing tonight, and John mentioned to me that John Thompson had mentioned to him that he had seen things in the buildings that were valuable and that we should be thinking of selling, and that apparently John O'Donnell from DCAM has told John Thompson that DCAM doesn't want any of this stuff and that it's going to be ours once we buy the site.
Yeah,
And
DCAM
so
is
that-
pretty much through.
That should be one of our first goals, is to inventory the site.
Yeah, I think between now and the time that the property actually changes hands, there may be a few things that we do want them to take. There are a couple of limbo
Yeah.
items, like, for example, the old paint shed and everything else, and I've asked
The
them to
Odyssey
take-
building.
And yes, so there will be a punch list, if you will.
What was the expected demolition date for the Odyssey building?
Well, it was supposedly
February.
it was supposedly going to be now, within the next several weeks. The contract, the RFP for the C&D work was originally due back the early part of May. It was slipped till the 28th of May. And I was going to be talking to DCAM tomorrow, but we've rescheduled our clean the drawings out of the buildings issue, so I don't have, at the moment, an update on the status of the bid. But it was presumably to occur somewhere close to the time that the work started down at the C&D area, so we need to get what that date is, and we'll follow up with John, and for your next meeting, either I or John Thompson will have a schedule, I think, of what the plans are.
Okay, thank you. Gil?
Just another point, it's not directly related, but Charlie Semino called me from Wentworth a couple days ago, and he is interested in continuing working, as they did last semester. He is willing to bring part of the exhibits. I think I know, Richard, you were there, and Pete, you were there. He's willing to bring some of the displays out to Medfield this summer. And we talked about it a little bit, of putting them in the center or maybe in the library. And I said I'd bring that up, in an appropriate time to see if that seemed like a good idea.
We need to find some spaces to show those. They're about 16 feet long, but maybe that's something.
He would just bring a
He'd bring a
smaller.
couple, not the whole
Yeah.
bunch.
Yeah,
There's 16 of them.
but I think that each one was like 16 feet long is what they told me when I was there.
The library would be, or probably the library or the center.
Bits and pieces.
Those places, yeah. Or maybe a school, so, you know, maybe in the school over the summer, could find a spot.
But as far as getting foot traffic, probably the library would be the best.
Yeah.
It's more central and people
Yeah.
would see it. Well, I can, he'd be interested in doing it, so I could
Good.
suggest that and try to set up a time.
Mike, do you want to reach out to Deborah Kelsey then, or to figure out where that might fit in the town?
And he also said that, assuming they go ahead and continue with the kind of work they've been doing, that they would want to work closely with this, this committee, this master plan committee.
That's great.
More so than they
Great.
did last,
That's
last time it was somewhat of an arm's length thing, but he would want to work much more closely and,
No, I
you know,
think
really
that's
tie it in better.
be a
Not
great
looking for a
resource.
second campus, are they?
I think
So-
we could a room there, I think, yeah.
So people that had changes, Richard and Roz, you're going to get your changes to Evelyn, and Evelyn, you can circulate a red line copy. So
I
that
just
we
gave
can
mine to Mike.
See what, anything else about the state hospital?
Just with respect to the master planning committee, I'm nervous about being a member because time commitment constraints, but I'm very interested in being involved with the process.
You're a
So-
named resource so far
So I'll
on
be
my
around.
list.
Yeah, I think we'll probably settle on that. I think we have a lot of folks like you such yourself that will need help with, but you just can't commit the time, yeah.
Exactly.
This is probably not part of the mission statement, but I would ask you to at least consider what the process will be when the time comes for disposition, sale, if you will, of parcels or pieces of the property, presumably in accordance with the master plan and in accordance with any town meetings or anything else. But what will the process be in bringing those pieces of property to the market for resale? I mean, what's the town process? I mean, will the selectmen have made the decision, or will it have gone through a separate meeting to the people, or what?
My expectation is that the town will make the decision, that the selectmen will make a recommendation based on what the committee recommends to us and what we like or don't like, and that we'll make a recommendation to the town, and that the town, through the town meeting probably, will vote on it.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe any sale of town property or lease of property requires a town meeting vote.
Okay, I'm just curious about, because I'm looking way far ahead, but I just thought we...
In addition to that, if you are going to put some sort of an overlay district in this part of your zoning
That'll
bylaw,
be-
then that would require a vote of town meeting.
Chris and Sarah had a special town meeting next June, a year from now.
Yeah, that might be a little ambitious for actually selling a piece of the property, but so I was trying to look a little bit beyond that as to, you know, I was looking at that as perhaps your master plan, approval of the master plan, approval of, you know, the initial. Yeah, or the overlay district or whatever,
Good.
yeah. And I was just looking beyond that to the actual sale of the property, what would the process be? Okay, I think you've answered it.
Master plan is finalized in May of next year.
Yeah. Thank you.
So, I mean, we don't want to sit on this. We want to move it, so.
I did write something up based on Roz's comments, if you want to add it. I put, and the resources of state and regional planning and/or development agencies.
Next thing is, we have a letter of resignation received from the Medfield Housing Authority member Roberta Lynch.
Fortunate, she's been a great member, but she's
Yeah,
no longer
she's
lives
moved
in
out of town,
and
so she
left
has to
it.
resign.
She has to be a resident, so.
Yeah. We have a letter from the Boston Society of Civil Engineers announcing the middle and high school students who participated in the annual, quote, "Design a Bridge Online" competition, close quote. Great event, and the Medfield kids always seem to score really highly. Licenses and permits. Medfield Firefighters Mutual Relief Association by David O'Toole requests permission to display signs advertising the annual Chicken Bake on June 14, 4:30. In addition, they request a common victualers permit for the event.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Is there
I'll
a second?
second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Medfield High School student Allison Reeling requests permission to place a shoebox recycling bin at the transfer station during Saturdays in June to benefit the Miss Amazing project. Superintendent Feeney recommends approval.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Kathy McLean, owner of Fitness Advantage located on West Street, requests a one-day wine and malt beverage permit for their open house to be held on Saturday, June 21.
Is that an oxymoron? The fitness and the, I certainly will second that, or actually make that motion, Mr.
I'll
Chairman.
second it.
All in favor? Yep. Pending, discuss selectmen's goals. You guys want to do that tonight? It's getting kind of late.
Kind of late.
I sent you mine already. Can we send each other?
Yeah, oh, here's mine, because you don't have mine yet, so here's mine, so I'll give you mine. and then we can-
folder?
Yeah, no, you know that, I'm kind of brief on most of these
Yours,
things.
Pete.
Oh, you didn't? I sent them to you, I thought. Okay.
Yeah.
I think you said you had written it, but you were gonna type or something.
Okay, so we'll put those off until our next meeting,
Thank you.
along with the town administrator's goals and the proposed calendar for selectmen. Mike updated that. Thank you, Mike, for doing that.
Yeah, pretty full,
Yeah, it is,
got a lot of stuff.
Yes, we look busy. Selectmen's reports, Mr. DeSorga.
Issue of time, that I have a number of different things that maybe if I can just send to Mike concerning basically the updates, the Farm and Harding Railroad Crossing, the Park Street signs, Columbia Gas, the good neighbor letters being sent to the boards and commissions. I did receive a letter from NSTAR concerning the landscaping in front of Route 27, high-tension lines. He requests that he meet with me in July with the NSTAR authority that is in charge of that, and maybe Ken Feeney or someone can come with me on that.
Probably
Eddie Hinckley then. Also, just quickly, there was an ad in today's Boston Globe, and if you saw that, for local municipalities can get free
Oh, yeah, we did see that.
lighting and stuff. I have that. I'll give that to you, Mike. You can see if that,
LED bulbs and fluorescent tubes.
if that looks good.
Yeah, I think I did get something on that, and I forwarded the superintendent, in case they, it seemed to be for, like, lamping programs for schools, and then I'll also check with the senior center. We've re-lamped most of our buildings already.
Oh,
Well, I'm
okay.
looking here, Mike, we've got fluorescents. You might want to think about swapping those out for LEDs. Talk to Fred Davis and see if that makes sense.
They are, yeah.
I had letters sent to me of concern of poison ivy growing on Curve Street. I'll give that to you, Mike. And also a concern of bicycle and automobile traffic on Pine Street. I'm not quite sure, that's such a narrow, windy road, what can be done with that? But I'll forward those letters to you as well. And is there any way we can get the bubbler turned on in front of Town Hall? When I walk by, I want my drink. And the other thing, which is gonna be an issue, I think, because I checked with the planning board, we have a street called Hammond Way, and it's named after the Hammond family, one of the first 13 settlers. It's on the Hammond land, and the sign is spelled wrong. Hammond is with one M, the sign spells it with two. Sarah researched the planning board, and the planning board in the original documents has it spelled with two. It's not an accepted street, there's two houses on that, and I'm sure the people that live there and their licenses and other such things have it incorrectly spelled. I'm not quite sure how we handle that.
Well, if it's not a public way,
It hasn't been accepted yet.
yeah, you probably would do it at the time it is up for acceptance. Is it proposed at some point in the future for acceptance?
I would imagine the street at some point is gonna come to be accepted, no?
Not necessarily. We have a lot of private ways.
Is it a
now.
private way, do you know? I thought it was a public way.
Yeah, I think it's a private way.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
Well, if it's a private way, is there any way we have control over that?
probably not. I don't think. I think it's up to the, whoever
We-
owns the
Residents.
center of the road, I guess. that
But we
party.
certainly have control over the name of the street.
Don't we have control over the name?
Sure, we have control over the name.
When it becomes a public way, we have control. Or if it's a part of a subdivision plan. I don't know how it was
Well,
developed. how
it sounds like the planning board named it.
They did, but they thought, and
The
the,
planning board
planning
probably
board
should
named it. I suppose
correct
they
their
could-
error.
I suppose they could change the name, but,
I believe the developer named it after the Hammond family, it's just that it was misspelled.
Yeah, well, maybe it may not be a big deal for the planning board to change it.
Okay, so, you want me to contact the planning board on that?
Sure, thank you.
The rest I'll send to Mike.
Okay, Mark?
Just, we've got high school graduation this Sunday, so it looks like it's gonna be a nice day, looks like it's gonna be hot again, 80 degrees. Well, that'll be nice.
Did they move it off I remember last year they.
To
had
1
it on
o'clock,
the-
they moved it up to 1.
To the grass?
Oh, it used to be
The
2.
problem, it was on the artificial.
It's always on the artificial turf.
The artificial turf gets quite a bit hotter.
About 100,000 degrees there, yeah.
Yeah.
It's, but But anyways, yeah, so that should be good. Like I said, it looks like a nice day, yeah.
Whichever selectman is
Yeah, and then this,
presentation.
and I think this Thursday's first Thursday, I think, Zulu Gallery, I think this first Thursday. It's probably gonna rain, right? That's usually what happens, unfortunately. Isn't the weather always, it's like a bad streak and stuff like that. And then we got Girl Scouts coming up, I believe, the bridging ceremony in another week or so.
Yes.
So, things are on the horizon there. Pete, yeah.
I would just mention a couple things. One is, I just handed Richard the material from the Energy Committee. Fred Davis arranged for the town to get a $12,000 grant from the Department of, it's Energy, it's DOER, and I can never remember what that stands for, but it's a state grant for $12,000 to help the town explore 3 or 4 solar photovoltaic installation sites in town. And this was the thing at our last meeting that you hadn't seen, Richard, for some reason, and so that Fred needs this vote to have Mike and/or me, I think, sign the contract so that he can get his $12,000 and get to work.
I think it's great.
Okay? Do you remember,
Yeah, but you
Mike,
wanna vote
who's
that
supposed to
you
sign?
vote to authorize.
Yes, you wanna make a motion, Richard, to vote?
I make a motion
It says,
that,
here it is from last meeting, to vote to authorize Town Administrator Sullivan to execute the contract for
Contract.
Solar Design Associates.
Yeah,
so moved.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yep. And then the other thing I would mention is, I went to something that the Cultural Council put on this morning at 8:30. It was like a join together and watch a webinar together in the basement of the library, and it was on community branding, and it was fascinating. It was about the idea of how do you brand your town?
Sure.
And there's this guy who's branded 350 towns, and he presented the webinar, and and so you get this expert, basically, who comes in and you choose a color, you choose a graphic, and you choose a tagline, and it sounds simple and it sounds hokey, but the things that they did were pretty cool.
It's interesting, yeah.
And it's like the Cultural Council, I thought, because I can't really quite figure out, I can't get my mind around what it's gonna do for us, but I think it's gonna be really good for us to have that. And I know that the people that are doing it with the Cultural Council are doing great stuff, and so I think that at some point we should do this community branding exercise.
Was it Cultural Council or Cultural Council District? Was it the district or the?
There's two, there's the Medfield Cultural Council and there's the Cultural District.
Who was doing the meeting?
Yeah,
I don't know, I can tell you who was there, if that would help you.
who's there?
Jean Minio, Rob Gregg,
Okay, that's the
Sarah
district.
Raposa,
That's the district.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, I
a
think,
cultural
yeah, I think-
district.
Ann Thompson was there.
It's the cultural district.
Cultural Council, there's a lot of overlap between the two, but it's more Bill Pope's
Bill Pope was there.
bailiwick. yeah.
Alex Lent, I think is his name, from the library. And then there were a couple of people that I didn't, there were 3 people that I just met this morning whose names I don't remember now, I'm afraid. And that's about it. Anything from the informational, Mike, that we should let people know about?
Yeah, a couple of things. The trash went up the rate for the waste management contract goes up. It's July 1st. And the rate is going up 1.14% or 85 cents a ton.
Okay.
So it's not too bad an increase this year. Ed Beard's now chairman of the assessors. The hospital tank replacement, that went to the ZBA. There's also going to be an application submitted to the planning board. That's for the water tower, basically.
Yep.
There is a question that the water sewer board dealing with, as you might expect. There is a lead paint problem around the existing tank, and they have to determine what the best way to deal with that, whether to cover it or to remove it. And there's quite a cost differential. It goes from like 60,000 to possibly 500,000 to 600,000.
That smokes.
So,
John Thompson's made some comments on that, by the way, to Jeremy, if you haven't seen the letter, he sent out a letter to,
I haven't, yeah.
made some recommendations and some,
Just haven't had a look. Good, good. I think they could use some advice on that, so. The sidewalk across the street, as you probably saw, is under construction. They finished about half today, and they expect
4
to do
ginkgo
the-
trees are in.
5?
And the trees are in the ginkgo trees, 5, yeah.
Males, you apparently don't want female ginkgo trees, I'm told.
That's right, they stink. They have a bad odor to them when they,
So we got nothing but male ginkgo trees.
yes, yeah. And also so they're hoping to finish the cement part tomorrow and then do the brick part. I understand from Richard that the store itself is coming along quite well. It's really remarkable progress.
They gave me a tour, and the basement, when you look at it, it looks like, whoa, they got a lot to do. But the whole basement level, where all the food is going to be processed, it looks like a school cafeteria.
Oh,
I mean,
my
that's
gosh,
all
great.
done down there. It's incredible what they've done. And they're actually talking a mid-July grand opening. And I said, what? And he said, we think we'll meet that, or be very close to meeting that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're working away, and I know they've run into some unexpected construction issues along the way that set them back, but they think they're going to open by mid-July.
So that's 6 weeks, that's great.
Yeah?
And I believe, is it Chris tomorrow is attending a tree?
Yes, in Andover, 6 hours.
Yes. designation.
I would love to go, but I wanted to go to that, I'm just working, so.
Okay, yeah. If anyone's not doing anything at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, the Permanent Building Committee's meeting to review the public safety building. And when's the Solid Waste Committee meeting, Evelyn? Is that the 10th? June 9th, okay. June 10th is the final breakfast at the Senior Center, and the Wednesday night cookouts begin at the 18th of
June?
Of June, so
Wow.
if you're interested
Every
in
Wednesday
attending any
night?
of those.
Yeah.
Just about every, I think it's 7 or 8.
I know,
so-
I should try to make some of those sometime. You gotta get there early though, right? What time is it?
They limit it
Yeah,
to
they're
100
limited to 100,
people or so.
Yeah,
so
so we gotta
it's,
decide
in
upon it.
preference to Medfield residents this
Okay.
year, so. And that's about it, I guess.
Okay.
Thank you very much, and then I guess we're done.
Excellent.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
This program was made possible through the generous support of your Medfield friends and neighbors.